Yeah, we're going live, by the way. Yeah, I think we are live, by the way. Just to let you know, JR, we are live. Little JR. We decided
Sorry.
we decided, pay attention. Pay attention. we decided to do a little, just a quickie setup of the Wells notice because we like the name, right? Isn't that true?
Richard, why is it Wells? Do you know? Why is it Wells?
I do. What a great question. There was
Awesome.
yeah.
I figured you would.
You must have come up with that by yourself. There was a senior general counsel of the SEC or whatever the equivalent organization was in 1972. His name was John Wells, and he came up with the system where you give a notification to somebody who might face further investigation, etc. And by the way, just to make sure you didn't forget about this, I'm reading a book about anti-gravity. It's impossible to put down. Anyway, so
hey folks, we are even goofier at 12:30 on a Wednesday than we are at 6:30 on a Sunday. So
or a 9:30 on a Wednesday.
9:30,
yeah, just depending on where you are located. So so tell us a little about what you know about Wells notices.
Well, my education came from looking into the Alpine GTII case and becoming aware of the notice that the SEC sends out that they've completed an investigation and are now kind of moving forward by giving the other party an opportunity to respond or moving forward with some type of enforcement action. The Wells notice is not public information. The only way we knew about it in the GTII case was because FINRA put it in one of their briefs in terms of the procedural history. As you and I talked briefly last night on the space, there's kind of this open question on whether the corporation is required to provide public notice of receiving a Wells notice. And you and I had a little kind of back and forth last night about that. But that's the extent of my knowledge on a Wells notice, other than now I know how it was named.
Yeah, and kind of what we speculated, because we talked about why the company Mmat put out a 8F, I think 8K filing yesterday, and we were wondering why. And my speculation was because Palikaris. So let's back up a little bit. So the Wells notices apparently went both to John Berta Palikaris and Mmat. As JR said, we don't have the Wells notices. All we have is the 8K that references the Wells notices. And the difference between what we see, the 8K, which is kind of generic, here is what it generally is about, and what the actual receipt of the Wells notice is probably substantially different. Because I think in practice, the Wells notice would be very specific factually and would outline at least what the claims are.
Right.
And what we get is kind of just the reference it, so it doesn't really give us a ton of information. But one thing that I found interesting was the 8K was sent out by the CFO, which I thought was interesting because generally I think it would come out from the CEO, but it also makes sense. It wouldn't come out from the CEO in this case because it was about an investigation involving the CEO. Right. And this is just an investigation, right? So it just means they whatever they did, we don't know what they did. They being the SEC, right. We don't know if to be honest, we don't even know if they're operating in good faith. Some of us suspect that maybe the timing of this notice may not have been entirely in good faith, but we don't know. But it raises suspicion. And at some point in time, they concluded their investigation. They send out the notice. They give all the parties opportunity to respond. That's my understanding. They have 30 days to respond. They probably can get an extension if it applies. And they can do a written response, or they can have an in-person response. Have like a meeting. Or they could do. I guess they could do both. And we kind of talked about this. So what? If let's say, and we're speculating, of course, like we always do. And by the way, not legal advice. Don't rely on any of this, please.
Yes, we're not purchasing MMTLP because of this conversation.
Yes, don't buy any MMTLP stock
You
because of this conversation.
don't sell it either.
Don't sell it either, but don't buy it. And don't rely upon this more than the length of this live stream.
And neither one of us are paid promoters for MMTLP.
At least not yet. But we're open to it. We're open to it. So we were talking about, you could have a written response, or you could have a meeting, or you could do both. So if there was a written response, we were asking the question, would you make that public? And if you didn't, why wouldn't you make that kind of public?
Right. Yeah, it's interesting, and again, going back to the debate we had last night, they received the notice on the 20th. They had internal conversations about, well, what are our next steps? Are we required to let shareholders know? Are we not required to let shareholders know? I'm sure there was some level of, we need to be as forthright as possible from their attorneys, because it's better to provide notice than not to provide notice. So I'd be willing to bet that there were quite a few Zoom meetings, team meetings, conference calls, just on that fact alone. What do we do and how do we move forward? I tend to think that I'm glad that they provided notice in their 8K, but for me, it's questionable whether or not they actually had to. And you fall on the other side of that. What's going to be interesting, I think, and Richard, how about we talk a little bit about this, is, do they make their response public? Do they provide the response back to the SEC, in the form of a written press release? I would think that I would think that they have to file a formal 8K in a response, but do they make that response public? So what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, so I look both ways. So I'm the attorney. If I'm the attorney for these, whoever it is, because I guess you could file 3 separate responses. One could be from John, one could be from George, and one could be from MMAT. So counsel, the natural reaction of counsel. So if I'm representing Berta, I tell them, no way. You keep this private, confidential, because you're being cautious. You don't know what, maybe you don't want something to come out because it might be misconstrued. But that's just going to be the general stance. And that's going to be probably most lawyers representing one of these parties, unless they saw some great benefit, they probably are inclined to say no. From our perspective, now being the MMTLP, MMAT shareholder perspective, we want to see that, right? Because it's not going to be just a simple response like, we're good guys. I expect it would be a very detailed response, setting forth in effect kind of a complaint against FINRA. And we'd garner a lot of information, and maybe that would be important to the dispute publicly. We kind of talked about it. So, once it's out in the air, because I don't know, my information sometime back was the SEC was pissed at FINRA over this entire matter. And it was a pain for them, and they wanted FINRA to take care of this. And, and I'm just conjecturing, but if the SEC really wanted to do it in a non-transparent way, they could set this scenario up. They could wait for the response that would be directed primarily at FINRA, and they would be kind of out of the loop, and FINRA would be exposed, and maybe there would be some way of moving forward on it. That's just my speculation, of course. I don't know what you think about that.
Well, I mean, I tend to agree with you, and let's emphasize 2 points in what you just said. Number one, this is a pain in the ass for the SEC because of one reason and one reason alone. And it's the community, the pressure the community has done in terms of FOIA requests, in terms of calling congressmen, in terms of calling the SEC, in terms of filing complaints. Lest we forget, Charles Payne said on his show they've sent 35,000 complaints, and Hester Pierce sat there like a deer in headlights. So if this is a pain in the ass, it's because of what the community has done. So because, this stuff happens in the market all the time. We're seeing it with GTAII and Fingers. So they know it happens. And their best case scenario would be that they put the U3 hold on and we all went walking away with our tails between our legs, but we did not. So if you go with the notion that the SEC is trying to get rid of this mess and throw it on FINRA, the other point that I want to make is, where would they start? They'd start at the beginning. And if you look at the four statutes that they put in the 8K, two of them deal with the issuance of the security. Well, we know they issued MMTLP, but if you go back to the original Torch proxy, it said right in there was no intent for this thing to trade. It wasn't until the June 21 memo by the OCC that basically said, well, we're not sure of the intent for it to trade on a national exchange. Intent OTC. So, which, by the way, someone retweeted what I posted back in January, which is mind-boggling that thing is still floating around. But I mean, in all reality, that's the response to, I think it was the statutory provision 13B and C, or A and B. I don't remember the alphabet it was, but that's the response. Yeah, we were the issuer, but it was meant to be held as a closely held, preferred share that was not supposed to be trading. So if you're the SEC and you're taking this investigation seriously, then that's the next step. Well, who got it trading? Well, who knows who got it trading? FINRA.
Yeah. And the other thing is, I don't think it, just because they make the allegations, I don't think it gives any validity to the allegations. Just because somebody screams loudly doesn't make it true. And again, I don't know the facts. I wasn't involved back then, so I'm just speculating again. But if you evaluate what the regulators have, and again, we're getting back to the regulators again. If you evaluate how the regulators have carried themselves in the activities that we are aware of, it doesn't give you a lot of feeling of comfort that what they say is accurate or credible, or might be motivated by other reasons. I have no reason. I mean, I know people that if you accuse them of something or accuse an organization of something, they'll just come after you. That's just kind of the way it goes. And the logic, I remember one, I'm not going to say the organization, but there was this big organization, and their litigation strategy was just to bombard whoever went after them, just so that everybody knew that if you were going to challenge us, it was going to be a ball buster. And it discouraged people from coming after them. So in this case, people that are involved in the capital markets, there's a lot of power the SEC holds over them. And, in this case, it wouldn't surprise me at all if this is just not a power play, SEC trying to exert its influence and control. And again, so part of what I was concerned about was just the impact on the MMTLP crowd and the community, because I think in part it's time for that to kind of stick another needle in to deflate the group. And you and I were talking about this, and that's why we're doing this now. After we heard that, after we considered it, and we don't know anything again, but we had no less confidence in the outcome than we had the day before. So for us, it's just an event, another tactic, but I don't think it's meaningful to the resolution of MMTLP. And as taking it one step beyond, I heard information that I don't think NextBridge considers this as an impediment to a resolution of the MMTLP situation. Of course, that's not an official pronouncement, but that's my understanding of that. And by the way, as an aside, there may be other information that might come out over the next few days. Maybe not, but I suspect there might be, and we were hoping it might have been today. So we were hoping that maybe in this particular live stream we might address it. We obviously do a Sunday at 6:30, and if it occurs between now and then, we will certainly address it. It doesn't relate to this specific issue, the Wells notice issue, though.
Well, let me just make a comment on what you said, because I don't think. I mean, two things. Number one, I believe that the share count is oversold. I believe that not only in my heart but in my mind. The other thing I'm growing more comfortable with, and we talked about this on Sunday, is the assets in the ground. So those kind of two facts that are becoming embedded in my logic. It's hard for me to have that doubt, even with things like this. Part of me last night, and I said it on the space, was this makes me a little bullish. And it makes me a little bullish because if the SEC decides to move forward against Palicaris, Metamaterials, and Berta from an enforcement standpoint, they can put up a defense. And, I've talked to John many times. I've heard John speak many times. I have, Palicaris has been on a couple of different spaces. Again, the facts are the facts. The facts and the truth will set them and us free. So, any judge that hears this story is going to go, what the hell happened here? And they're going to want to learn as much as they can. I would tend to think that a judge would give them a lot of leeway in bringing facts to light just to get to the truth.
I was going to say beyond that, there may be, because we've been talking about these cases the last 2-3 weeks. In my mind, here's another case. If the SEC tried to exert jurisdiction over this dispute, right, I would not be surprised these guys raise a constitutional challenge to the SEC's enforcement powers, because that seems to be fair game right now.
Right. And if you think about it, if us two schmucks who aren't necessarily good attorneys are paying attention to this stuff, we're not getting paid. You and I have talked. Yes, we're shareholders, but we're not part of the crowd that's hurting. We're here to help the people that are hurting. But if you and I are paying attention to this, do you not think Wes is? Do you not think? I know Mark is, because I've talked to him about it. I mean, these attorneys that are on the team are looking at all of these things, and they're processing and analyzing and putting it all together. I wouldn't be surprised if they already don't have a mental response ready to go. You just need to kind of shift and move and present things.
Yeah, to the extent that we present, our theories and arguments, I'd like to believe that they're all novel and nobody has ever thought of them. But especially since it's not our specialty, I'm guessing that we're gonna hitting the base. So
we're like 2 steps behind these guys. Come on.
Yeah. At best, we're giving you kind of like what two guys that don't know anything, what they theorize.
I can assure you, Wes and Mark are not watching these YouTube videos taking notes. Like, holy shit, right. I didn't know that.
Yeah, they're studying. They're studying this afternoon.
Yeah, we like to think.
But on the flip side, I think we are giving theories and that apply. It's just that we're probably not giving every theory just because we don't know. Be honest, and we don't practice in this area. But what we're trying to do, and kind of like the purpose of all these things, is to explain kind of generally what's going on, so everybody has a better idea. Not for everybody to become an expert in Wells notices, that kind of thing. Yeah, because we certainly aren't. No. I'm sure it pisses. If it were me, I'm sure it pisses off Berta, Palicaris, and MMAT, because I'm sure they think they're being targeted, and nobody likes to be targeted. Besides the stress and the expense, nobody likes it. So. Or maybe M. Casey likes it. I don't know.
I love that. You have to read that. I love that.
Oh, okay. Nice. All right. Why not? Why not? That's a good
Why
idea.
not? LOL. Why not?
Yeah. Why not? Yeah. So again, but the point was, we weren't moved. We don't think it changes the needle. I feel bad for the guys. And I'm hoping that there's nothing to any of the claims. I have no reason to suspect that. Right. Anyway, that's kind of all I was going to say. Anything you want to add to this?
I have no reason. I have no reason to have any less confidence than I did 2 days ago. And I'll go back to what I said. My basic premise has always been we were oversold. There's no way we weren't. I don't see how we weren't. They shorted the shit out of this the last 2 days. They probably did the same thing to Torch. All I'm missing in my head is what's the final number. That's it.
That's a good point, because I wanted to raise that and I forgot to. You also can have, and I'm just going to use this very generally, you can have a ongoing transaction, and let's say the first part we're going to call X and the second part we'll call Y. And maybe there's a problem with X, but it all the way went to Y. So maybe they have to deal with X, but that probably doesn't affect the guys at the end of Y. So you could have one thing true and things going on, but not affecting the final the goal. And I kind of, that's the way I see this. Again, like I said, I don't really know the facts. I don't know what happened, whatever. I just don't think it impacts the outcome at the end. And I think, and I think it's a way of creating noise. And the thing that struck me is like somebody who's pro our position kind of fed into it. Frank Nez. So I saw it last night. I got an email. It said that they went after MMAT. I'm sure he's just reporting it. But it kind of promotes the FUD that it's intended to create. So I just noted it because he's a good guy. He's on our side. I think he supports retail, obviously, but it was interesting to see him kind of follow along.
Right. Well, it's like we said last night, and I don't by any stretch of the imagination think that Frank Nez is promoting FUD. He's reporting on the facts. That was the headline he chose. So be it. But we know, and I gave it 7 days. So I'm on day 1 now, but I give it 7 days before one of the major financial news outlets reports on this. And there's no doubt in my mind it's going to be nothing more than a hit piece. I would be flabbergasted if they did not.
I would have presumed that remember there was 3?
Yeah.
I think there were 3. I presume that they're all going to write follow-ups.
I guarantee
expect that, right?
Guarantee it. I'd be surprised if they're not out by the weekend.
Yeah. And, again, from our community standpoint, again, I don't know the facts, but I do know that people are going to try to take advantage of the situation. And to the extent that I just don't listen to it, honestly, I pay no attention to it. I don't give it any power. I don't give it any credibility. And I understand the purpose. It's just the same that there were times when I was looking, I wasn't looking at in terms of shorting, but when I was following a bunch of biotech companies that were trying to make drugs, et cetera, there were always these reports that came out that were designed to cripple the finances of those companies. And there were very few remedies for going after those people making those claims. And there was no way to undo the damage. So I'm suspicious of when people report, I'm suspicious of the motivations, intentions.
Oh, absolutely.
And we obviously have seen it. I remember I interviewed with Investor Place. I think that's the name of the rag, and they were purporting to do a fair and balanced story about MMTLP, and it basically died, and they were accused of being a short, in favor of shorts, and the only thing they printed was supporting the shorts in MMTLP. They ignored. They interviewed a lot of people too, but they ignored everybody. So just people have to be aware that if you see stories, don't take them don't take them as true on their face. Analyze them and see who's writing it and see what their motive and interest is, because that's really important, and it causes a lot of distress. So.
And see who owns their editorial board. That's always important. I go back to what Patrick Burns said on the space that he participated on many weeks ago at this point about the 4 points that you can guarantee to see. And the SEC investigation was one of them. So basically everything that Patrick mentioned has come to fruition in MMTLP, sometimes multiple times over. So it's very telling. The playbook is the playbook, and it's the only plays they have. And they were ill prepared for the organization of this community and the pressure that this community has put upon these agencies as well as Congress. So, if there's anything to be learned from the Wells notice being provided to these folks and Mmat it's keep the pressure up because we're doing something right.
And just to clarify, so the Wells notice is a notice that comes out from the SEC. So FINRA has their own notice, but it involves financial institutions. Right. So just to kind of to lay it out, and again, they have 30 days to respond, and I don't think, at least in my mind, it has any reference to MMTLP NextBridge or the outcome of that as of this point in time. I don't give it any validity, and I don't know the facts. I'm just, I'm upfront with that. But it doesn't change, it just doesn't change my view. And I know it was kind of a shocking notice to come out, and it sounds really harsh. It sounds harsh, but in reality, it's just kind of the way the SEC does business. And again, I'm speaking for myself. I'm suspicious of the timing. I was suspicious of the timing when it came out. I know Gensler was speaking yesterday also at some kind of conference, and I know Berta talked about concern about this, months ago. I don't think he'd be surprised if they came after him at that point.
Yeah. Well, John strikes me as a pretty even keel guy, so I'm sure in the back of his head he was waiting, when's it coming? And if you go back to Howard's FOIA drop, we knew they were doing a fraud investigation.
Right.
So
one of the other point is that this is civil action, not a criminal action. So the remedies are limited to damages or some injunctive relief and whatever else they can do. But we're not talking about a criminal notice. This is just about purported violations of a bunch of code sections that were, general, and that I think that unfortunately the SEC and FINRA were, at least to the extent there's any truth to any of these claims, the SEC and FINRA knew all of this stuff at all times. And they certainly,
I know, right?
Yeah, they were there. They were there at the time.
They watched it.
Yeah. So they, again, this really, it rings hollow. And again, the whole point of this is just don't let it be a distraction and move on. Continue the stuff you're doing, because it's obviously impactful. Everybody knows that we're here. So just keep it, because their goal is to shut us up. Let's keep up the noise.
Right. That's their only tool against us, is to shut us up and to divide us.
Yeah.
So, we need to stick together as a group, and we need to keep the pressure on, whether that's calling Congress every day, sending letters out, do what I do, which is kind of prep people to talk to congressional staff, review stuff. Those are the things that we need to keep doing, because that's their Achilles heel. At some point, the tsunami is going to break and something's going to give, and the truth is going to come out, whether it's through this Wells notice, whether it's through the pressure we're applying, whether it's something unknown that we've not even talked about. At some point, the evidence is going to bubble up.
Yeah. And as JR, I'm not trying to be like, make a heroic statement, but JR and I have and we're not alone. There's some people, we're here to the end. So we're not going anywhere. We're here. We may suffer. It may not be easy, but we're not going anywhere. And we've demonstrated that to this point in time, there's nothing that's going to, if they blow up our buildings, okay, whatever. But, I'm joking, of course. But, nothing's going to, nothing.
I just can't wait till this is over, so I don't have to listen to your lame jokes anymore.
Maybe you should tell the SEC.
Yeah. Gary, please end this.
That's right. That's what. If he's watching these, maybe he has an interest in ending it. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, we beat up on him and Robert Cook so much they probably stopped watching long ago.
Yeah. I'm sure they're not fans though.
Yeah, well, whatever.
Yeah, I know. Anyway, we figured we were going to do like a half hour about there, so that was it. We didn't have like a ton to say. We just kind of wanted to make everybody understand how we felt about it, and it is what it is. I don't think it impacts the outcome, so we're just going to move on. Everybody, I'm going to say we're not Siamese twins, by the way, but. Actually, we are in the same room. We're in the same room.
Yes, we
We're
are.
just pretending to be in two different places.
Richard's in my closet, and I recall Wes is behind me somewhere.
And I think little mini JR is coming out of the closet. Anyway, have a great day, everybody. We'll see you.
Yep, everybody. Yep. See you Sunday.
Take care.
Talk to you soon, Richard. Bye.
Bye-bye. Take care.